If someone had told me that my wedding would end before it even began, not because of an argument, not because of another woman, but because my dead father came back to warn me, I would have smiled politely and said they were being dramatic. I am not a superstitious person. I am a practical woman. I work with numbers, with contracts, with things that can be proven. And yet, at 4:18 in the morning, on the day I was supposed to get married, my father stood in front of me in a dream and said something that froze my blood. Do not marry him. Go to his mother's house this morning. Go alone. You will see everything. I woke up gasping for air. My hands were shaking. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Outside my window, the sky over Surrey was still dark. The streets were empty. And somewhere in the wardrobe, my wedding dress was hanging, perfect, untouched, waiting. The ceremony was scheduled for that afternoon, less than half a day away. Guests would soon be waking up. Hair appointments had already been booked. Flowers were being delivered. Messages were lighting up my phone. Everything was moving forward, except me. My father had been gone for 3 years. He had never believed in signs or omens, but he had believed in one thing more than anything else. That lies always reveal themselves just before they destroy you. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to convince myself this was just a dream, just stress, just fear before a big day. But deep down, in the place where the body reacts, before the mind finds excuses, I knew something was wrong, very wrong, because this was not the first time. I had felt this quiet warning. I had ignored it before, and I had paid for it. So when my father told me to go, I listened. I did not tell my fiancé. I did not call anyone. I got dressed, walked out of my flat, and drove toward his mother's house, with a single thought repeating in my head. If I was wrong, I would lose a wedding. But if I was right, I would lose my life as I knew it. And what I saw when I rang that doorbell changed everything. Before I continue, comment the number 1 below if you want to hear the full story. Before everything broke, my life looked exactly the way it was supposed to. I lived alone in a small but carefully kept flat in Surrey, close enough to London to commute, far enough to feel calm when I closed the door at night. I owned the flat in my own name, not because I was lucky, but because I had planned my life that way. I was raised to believe that independence was not a luxury, it was protection. After my father died, that belief became something close to a rule. I worked. I saved. I avoided unnecessary risks. I trusted facts more than feelings. I was 31 years old, a management accountant for a mid-sized transport firm, the kind of job that rewarded consistency, attention to detail, and emotional restraint. My days were predictable in the best possible way. I woke up early. I made the same breakfast. I took the same train. I answered emails. I balanced reports. I came home. Nothing dramatic. Nothing chaotic. And that was exactly why I liked it. In England, we do not usually measure happiness by excitement. We measure it by stability, quiet evenings, orderly routines, a sense that tomorrow will look more or less like today. From the outside, my life looked settled, safe, complete, and for a long time, I believed it was. When Matthew came into my life, he did not disrupt that order. He fit into it. He admired my independence. He never joked about me being too focused on work. He never asked why I wanted everything in my own name. He said he respected it. That mattered to me. We did not rush into anything. We dated in a way that felt grown up. Dinners booked a week in advance. Walks after work. Weekends planned carefully around schedules. There were no dramatic declarations. No emotional roller coasters. No arguments that lasted past midnight. When he proposed, it felt less like a surprise and more like the natural next step. By the time we started planning the wedding, I approached it the same way I approached everything else in my life, like a project. I made lists. I created timelines. I opened spreadsheets, venue, catering, guest numbers, costs, deposits. Everything had its place. I did not dream about the dress. I researched it. I did not imagine the day. I organized it. Friends joked that I was treating my wedding like a corporate event. I laughed and agreed. In my mind, love did not need chaos to be real. It needed structure, trust, reliability. The wedding planning became part of my routine, not a disruption of it. Emails during lunch breaks, calls after work, decisions made calmly. Nothing about it felt overwhelming. If anything, it felt reassuring. The closer the date came, the more people said the same thing. You must be so excited. You must be counting down the days. You must feel complete. I smiled. I nodded. I said the right things. Because on paper, everything was perfect. I was marrying a man with a stable business. I had my own home. We lived in a good area. There was no financial pressure, no obvious conflict. This was the kind of life people described as sensible, and I was a sensible woman. That is why, when the first small discomfort appeared, I dismissed it. It was nothing clear, nothing dramatic, just a quiet moment where something did not sit quite right, a thought that passed quickly, a hesitation I could not explain. I told myself it was nerves. Everyone gets nervous before a wedding. I told myself it was fatigue. Planning anything takes energy. I told myself it was fear of change, not a warning. Because in a life built on logic, feelings without evidence are easy to ignore, especially when everything else appears to be in order. The flat was clean. The accounts were balanced. The calendar was full. The future looked mapped out. There was no reason to stop. And yet, looking back now, that was exactly the problem. Everything was decided. Everything was moving forward. There was no space left for doubt. And no one had taught me what to do when the danger does not arrive loudly, when it does not shout, when it does not break anything, when it simply waits, quietly, inside a life that looks perfect from the outside. I did not fall in love with Matthew the way people describe in films. There was no sudden spark, no moment where the world seemed to stop. Instead, there was something quieter, something that felt, at the time, far more convincing. I met Matthew by chance, or at least, that is how it seemed. I was at a bank branch in central London, handling paperwork for a client. He was there for what he called a complicated loan consultation. We started talking because I was the only one available to explain a few figures. It was not flirtation. It was practical, professional. That was what made it easy. He listened when I spoke. He did not interrupt. He asked sensible questions. When I finished, he thanked me, genuinely, and said, "You explain things clearly. That's rare." It was a small compliment, but it landed. We ran into each other again a week later. Then again, coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into something regular. Matthew was not flashy. He did not dress to impress. He wore clean coats, well-fitted shirts, sensible shoes. He did not talk loudly about success. He talked about plans. He owned a small logistics business. He spoke about expansion carefully, never exaggerating. He did not promise millions. He promised stability, and that word mattered to me. After my father died, I had learned to be cautious. I did not want excitement. I did not want uncertainty. I wanted something that felt solid, predictable, safe. Matthew seemed to understand that without me having to explain it. He never pushed. He never rushed. He did not flood me with messages or dramatic gestures. If he said he would call at 7, he called at 7. If he said he would see me on Thursday, he did. There was comfort in that consistency. When I spoke about my work, he listened. When I said I liked having my flat in my own name, he nodded and said, "That makes sense. You worked for it." No jokes. No wounded pride. No subtle pressure. He never tried to impress my friends. He never tried to outshine anyone. At dinners, he asked questions. At family gatherings, he stayed polite and reserved. People liked him, not because he was charming, but because he was easy to be around. He blended into my life rather than demanding space in it. That was what made the relationship feel grown up. We did not argue often. And when we did, it never escalated. He would pause, think, then say, "Let's talk about this properly." It felt mature, balanced. When he spoke about the future, he did not paint fantasies. He spoke in steps. A house one day, a routine, a life that did not feel fragile. He told me once, "I don't want chaos. I want something that lasts." I remember nodding, because that was exactly how I felt. The proposal itself reflected everything else about him. No crowd, no performance, just dinner at a quiet restaurant near the river. He did not kneel dramatically. He did not make a speech. He simply said, "I think we work well. I think we could build something steady together. Would you marry me?" It was not poetic, but it felt honest. I said yes without hesitation, not because I was swept away, but because it felt logical. Right. Matthew did not change after that. If anything, he became more attentive. He checked in. He asked how I was coping with the planning. He reassured me when I worried about small details. He never took over. He never disengaged. He stood beside me. When people asked how I knew he was the one, I struggled to explain. There was no grand story, no dramatic moment. I trusted him because he did not trigger my defenses, because my life did not feel disrupted around him. He felt like the kind of man you could build a life with quietly, without everything falling apart. Looking back now, I understand why that mattered so much to me. After loss, quiet can feel like safety. And Matthew, in every way that mattered at the time, felt safe. I met Matthew's mother for the first time on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Her name was Vivienne Caldwell. She lived alone in a neat, semi-detached house in Guildford, the kind of place where everything looks permanently prepared for visitors. The curtains were perfectly aligned. The hallway smelled faintly of polish. There were framed photographs on the wall, but none of them felt personal. Vivienne opened the door with a polite smile, the kind that appears fully formed, as if it had been practiced. She looked me up and down, quickly, efficiently, then stepped aside. "Please come in." Her voice was calm, measured, warm in tone, but distant underneath. We sat at the dining table. Tea was already prepared, biscuits laid out neatly, untouched. Matthew sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on mine. Vivienne watched this, said nothing, then turned to me. "So, Eleanor," she said, "you live on your own, don't you?" "Yes," I replied. "In London?" "Surrey," I corrected gently. "Close enough to commute." She nodded, as if ticking something off in her mind. "And the flat," she continued. "Is it rented?" "No," I said. "I own it." There was a brief pause, just long enough to notice. "Oh," she said, "that's impressive." She stirred her tea slowly, then asked, "And you bought it yourself?" "Yes." Another pause. "And your work," she said. "Matthew mentioned you're in finance." "I'm a management accountant." She smiled again. "A sensible profession," she said. "Very stable." The word stable landed softly, but it stayed. She leaned back slightly, folded her hands. "And your parents?" she asked. "Are they nearby?" "My father passed away," I said. "My mother died when I was younger." Her eyes did not soften. "I see," she said. "So you're quite independent?" "Yes," I replied. She nodded again. "No siblings?" "No." Another nod. Matthew squeezed my hand, as if to reassure me. I smiled at him, trying to keep the moment light. Vivienne looked between us, then said, "You've done well for yourself." It sounded like praise, but something about the way she said it felt more like an assessment. She took a sip of tea, then asked casually, "And your income? Is it comfortable?" The question was delivered without embarrassment, as if it were entirely normal. I hesitated for half a second, then answered vaguely, "It's sufficient." "That's good," she said. "Very good." She turned to Matthew then, her tone changing slightly. "You've always needed someone grounded," she said. "Someone who knows how to manage things." Matthew smiled. He did not disagree. Then she looked back at me, her eyes steady, and said the sentence I would replay many times later. "Matthew needs a woman like you." She did not say it warmly. She did not say it coldly either. She said it as if she were stating a fact. At the time, I took it as approval. I laughed softly and said, "I suppose we balance each other." Vivienne smiled, but her eyes remained unchanged. "Yes," she said, "balance is important." The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. She spoke about the neighborhood, about the local shops, about how long she had lived there. Everything was polite, civil, correct. And yet, when we left, I felt an unexpected tightness in my chest. In the car, Matthew asked, "So, what did you think of her?" I searched for the right answer. "She's very organized," I said. He laughed. "That's one way of putting it." I told myself that the discomfort was nothing. Meeting parents is awkward. Everyone asks strange questions. Everyone wants reassurance. That is what I told myself. Still, later that night, as I replayed the conversation, I realized something small but unsettling. Vivienne had not asked a single question about who I was as a person. She did not ask what I enjoyed, what I wanted, what made me happy. She had asked about assets, security, stability. At the time, I brushed it aside. After all, in England, we often confuse practicality with care. We believe that asking the sensible questions means someone is looking out for you. But there was something about the way she looked at me that did not feel like concern. It felt like evaluation, as if I had been measured and quietly approved, not for who I was, but for what I represented. I did not mention this to Matthew. There was nothing concrete to point to, nothing I could accuse anyone of. It was just a feeling, and feelings without evidence are easy to dismiss. But if you have ever sat across from someone who smiled at the right moments, asked the right questions, and still left you feeling slightly unsettled, you will understand what I mean. Before I continue, comment the number 1. If you have ever ignored a moment like that, only to realize later that it was trying to warn you. The message arrived in the late afternoon, the day before the wedding. I was still at my desk when my phone vibrated, half hidden under a stack of printed schedules. It was from Matthew. "Can you come by my mum's place early tomorrow? She wants to go over a few final details." That was all. No urgency. No explanation. Just a polite request, wrapped in the language of organization. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Then I typed, "Okay." A single word. A reflex. The kind of reply you send without thinking. But my fingers were shaking when I pressed send. Not because I was afraid of his mother. I had already met her. I knew her manner, her questions, her calm, assessing tone. This was different. For days, there had been a strange heaviness sitting just below my ribs, not sharp enough to call pain, not loud enough to call fear, just present. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the wedding planning board pinned to the wall. Colored notes, neat handwriting, everything accounted for. Venue confirmed, flowers ordered, guests seated, timings finalized. The word tomorrow stood out more than anything else. Tomorrow. A thought crossed my mind, so quietly that I almost missed it. What if I stop? What if I do not go through with this? The idea startled me. I straightened in my chair as if someone might have overheard. People do not cancel weddings because of feelings. Not sensible people. Not at this stage. You cancel weddings because of evidence. Because of betrayal. Because of something you can point to. Not because your body is uneasy, and your thoughts will not settle. I told myself I was tired, that I had done too much planning, that everyone feels strange the day before a wedding. I closed my laptop, packed my bag, went home. That evening, I tried to distract myself. I cooked a simple meal. I watched half of a program without really seeing it. I laid out my clothes for the morning. Everything felt deliberate, controlled. And yet, the feeling did not leave. It followed me into the bedroom. It sat with me as I turned off the light. When I finally fell asleep, the dream came without warning. I was standing in my father's old living room, the one he had lived in before he died. Nothing was out of place. The armchair, by the window, the small table with a stack of newspapers, the lamp he never turned off completely. He was sitting in the chair, wearing the same grey jumper he always wore at home. He looked exactly as he had the last time I saw him. Not ill, not tired, just serious. He did not smile. "Do not go there with him," he said. "Go alone. Tomorrow morning." His voice was calm, certain. I tried to speak, to ask why, but my throat closed as if something was pressing against it. He watched me struggle, then said one more thing. "You will see what they are choosing you for." I woke up suddenly, my heart racing. The room was dark. The clock read 4:18. For a long moment, I lay completely still, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, just my mind under stress, just memory mixing with fear. But the feeling in my chest was different now, heavier, clearer. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. My phone was on the bedside table. My wedding dress was hanging quietly in the wardrobe. My life was waiting for me to step into it. And for the first time, I realized that the message Matthew had sent was not an invitation. It was a direction, a step forward into something I could not yet see. If you are listening to this, and you have ever agreed to something, even though every part of you hesitated, comment the number 2 below. And if you have ever felt a warning you could not explain, comment the number 3. I did not tell Matthew where I was going. I did not leave a note. I did not check my phone. That morning, I moved quietly through my flat, as if any sudden sound might break whatever fragile clarity I had found during the night. I showered. I dressed. I chose clothes that made me look ordinary. Jeans, a dark coat, my hair tied back low, nothing that suggested a wedding, nothing that invited questions. The sky outside was pale and overcast, the kind of English morning that feels undecided. I locked the door behind me and walked down the stairs without looking back. The drive to Guildford was calm, too calm. Traffic moved smoothly. The radio played softly. Everything looked normal. That unsettled me more than chaos would have. As I turned into Vivienne Caldwell's street, I noticed how quiet it was. No cars pulling out of driveways, no doors opening, no movement. Her house stood exactly as I remembered it, neat, prepared, still. I parked a short distance away, not close enough to draw attention, and walked the rest of the way. My footsteps sounded louder than they should have. I reached the front gate and paused, one hand resting on the latch. This was the moment I could still turn back. I thought of my father's voice. Not loud, not emotional, certain. I opened the gate. Before I reached the front door, movement caught my eye. From the side of the house, a woman stepped into view. She was young, blonde. Her coat was half-buttoned, her hair loose and untidy, as if she had dressed in a hurry. She froze when she saw me. For a second, we simply stared at each other. There was something in her expression I recognized immediately. Fear. Not embarrassment, not confusion, fear. She glanced back toward the house, then down the street, as if calculating her escape. Without saying a word, she walked quickly past me, too quickly. Her car was parked further down. She reached it, got in, and drove away without hesitation. I stood there, the front door only a few steps away, my heart beating steadily, but harder than before. I told myself there could be explanations. Friends visit, neighbors stop by, people come and go. Still, the image of her face stayed with me. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I waited, rang again. After a moment, the door opened. Vivienne stood there, perfectly dressed, as if she had been expecting guests all along. Her hair was neat, her makeup subtle, her expression composed. She smiled. "Eleanor," she said, "you're early." Her eyes flicked briefly down the street, then back to me. "Come in." Inside, the house felt different. Not wrong, just occupied. The air was warm, but the windows were closed. The room smelled faintly of perfume that was not Vivienne's. We walked toward the dining room. On the table, papers were spread out, not arranged neatly, not stacked, open. Vivienne noticed my glance and moved slightly, positioning herself between me and the table. "Just wedding things," she said lightly. "Nothing interesting." She gestured for me to sit. I did. My coat remained on. My bag stayed on my shoulder. I did not relax. Vivienne poured tea, her movements smooth, controlled. "Matthew will be joining us later," she said. "He's running a bit behind." I nodded. Through the window, I could see the street, still empty. No sound of preparation, no signs of celebration. This was the morning of my wedding, and yet nothing here acknowledged it. No flowers, no cards, no excitement, only quiet. Vivienne handed me a cup. Her hand did not shake. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Enough," I replied. She smiled, as if that answer pleased her. We sat in silence for a few seconds, long enough to feel deliberate. Then she spoke. "I wanted to talk to you alone," she said, "before everything begins." The way she said everything did not sound like a ceremony. It sounded like a transaction. I listened. She asked polite questions, neutral questions, questions that required very little of me. How was traffic? Had I eaten? Was I nervous? I answered calmly. All the while, my attention kept drifting back to the table, to the papers, to the sense that something had already happened here, before I arrived. At one point, Vivienne followed my gaze and smiled faintly. "You look tense," she said. "It's understandable." She paused, then added, "This is an important day." Her emphasis was subtle, but it landed. Important for whom? I thought of the woman who had walked past me, the urgency in her steps, the way she had not looked back. I thought of my father's words, "You will see what they are choosing you for." I took a breath. I had not come here to confront anyone, not yet. I had come to observe, to notice, to understand. And as I sat there, in that quiet house, on the morning of my wedding, I realized something I had not allowed myself to consider before. This was not a meeting. It was an examination, and I was already inside the room. I did not reach for the papers. I told myself there was no reason to, that they were exactly what Vivienne said they were. Wedding documents, invoices, seating plans, normal things. Still, my eyes kept returning to the table, to the way the pages were spread, not stacked, not clipped, as if someone had been working through them and left in a hurry. Vivienne noticed. She always noticed. Her chair shifted slightly, just enough to block my view. "Shall we talk through the schedule?" she said, her voice smooth. "Matthew likes things to run on time." I nodded, though my attention had already slipped past her words. As she spoke, she reached for the papers herself, gathered them with a practiced movement, then paused. A single folder remained on the table. It was thinner than the others, plain, no logo, no color, just a handwritten label on the front. Single homeowners. The words were neat, deliberate. They did not belong in a wedding conversation. Vivienne followed my gaze. For the first time that morning, she hesitated. It was brief, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. "Oh," she said lightly, "that's nothing." She placed her hand over the folder, not closing it, just resting there. "Just some notes," she added. "Old paperwork." I did not ask to see it. I did not need to. The title alone had already lodged itself somewhere deep, where explanations could not reach. Single homeowners. I repeated the phrase silently, trying to fit it into something harmless. A survey, a community project, a mailing list, anything. Vivienne moved the folder aside, sliding it toward the edge of the table. As she did, the top page shifted, just enough. I caught a glimpse of names, addresses, short handwritten notes in the margins, nothing that formed a clear picture. Nothing I could point to and say, "This is wrong." And yet, my skin prickled. Vivienne resumed talking, her tone unchanged. She spoke about timing, about traffic to the venue, about how early the photographer would arrive. Her words flowed easily, comfortably. I listened, answered when appropriate, nodded at the right moments. Outwardly, I was calm. Inside, something was tightening. I noticed details I would not normally have paid attention to. The way Vivienne avoided touching the folder again. The way her eyes flicked toward it, then away. the way she spoke a little faster, as if filling space. I wondered who else had sat at this table, who else had looked at that folder, who else had been told, "This is nothing." My father's voice surfaced, uninvited. "You will see what they are choosing you for." I swallowed. Vivienne stood, collecting the rest of the papers. "Tea?" she asked. "Or would you prefer coffee?" "Tea is fine," I said. She poured, her hand steady. No nerves, no rush. The normality of it all felt deliberate, like a cover carefully maintained. I wrapped my fingers around the cup, letting the warmth ground me. This was not proof. It was not even a suspicion. It was a sensation, a sense that I had walked into a room where a conversation had already begun, and I was only now being allowed to hear the echo. Vivienne returned to her seat. "Matthew will be pleased you came early," she said. "It shows commitment." Commitment. The word landed heavily. I thought of the woman who had left through the side of the house, the speed of her steps, the look in her eyes. I thought of the folder, of the names I had half seen, of the label that refused to make sense. I did not confront Vivienne. I did not accuse her of anything. There was nothing to accuse. And yet, the air between us had changed. It felt thinner, sharper, as if the room itself was waiting to see what I would do next. Vivienne smiled at me again, the same practiced smile from the doorway. "You must be nervous," she said. "That's perfectly natural." I smiled back. If I had spoken then, I might have asked questions I was not ready to hear the answers to, so I stayed quiet. I watched. I remembered. Because whatever that folder represented, it was not meant for me to understand yet. It was meant to be noticed, and once noticed, it could not be unseen. Not on the morning of my wedding. Not ever. Vivienne stood up and moved toward the sideboard. She did not ask if I wanted to see anything. She did not announce what she was doing. She simply reached into a lower drawer and pulled something out. An album. It was thick, old-fashioned, the kind with heavy pages and a stiff spine. She placed it on the table between us. The sound it made was soft, but final. I looked at the cover. No title, no date. Just a faint crease where hands had opened it many times before. Vivienne sat back down. "I think it's better if you know," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. I did not respond. She opened the album herself. The first pages were harmless. Matthew as a child. School photographs. A holiday by the sea. I recognized his smile immediately. The same restrained curve of the mouth. The same careful eyes. Then she turned the page, and the room shifted. There he was again. Older now, standing beside a woman I had never seen before. She was blonde. Younger than me. Her arm was linked through his. They looked comfortable. Familiar. Vivienne turned another page. More photographs. The same woman. Different settings. Different clothes. A kitchen. A garden. A small registry office. Then I saw it. A photograph taken from the front. Clear and deliberate. Matthew in a dark suit. The woman in white. They were standing close together. Hands joined. Behind them, a small arrangement of flowers. A smile that was not for the camera, but for each other. I did not breathe. Vivienne watched my face carefully. "It was a short marriage," she said. "Years ago." I looked at the photograph again. There was nothing short about it. The familiarity, the ease, the way he leaned slightly toward her, as if that was where he belonged. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Vivienne closed the album gently. "He didn't think it mattered," she said. "It was over. Over." The word landed heavily. She continued. "It was a difficult time for him. He made mistakes. We all do." I looked up at her. "And the woman I saw leaving your house this morning," I said. "Is that her?" Vivienne did not answer immediately. She picked up her teacup, took a measured sip. "No," she said finally. "That was someone else. Someone else." The phrase echoed. I realized then that this album was not meant to explain anything. It was meant to contain the damage, to define it, to keep it manageable. "This changes things," I said. Vivienne met my gaze. "It shouldn't," she replied. You're here now. Here. Not loved. Not chosen. Here. She leaned forward slightly. Matthew needs stability, she said. Someone sensible. Someone with her life in order. I felt something crack. Very quietly. Somewhere behind my ribs. You knew about this, I said. It was not a question. Vivienne did not deny it. I knew what he went through, she said. I protected my son. Protected. From consequences. From honesty. I closed the album. My hands were steady. I need some air, I said. Vivienne nodded. Of course she did. Take a moment, she said. This is a big day. I stood up. The room felt smaller than before. The air thinner. As I walked toward the door, I noticed something I had not allowed myself to think about. There were no signs of a wedding in this house. No flowers. No cards. No excitement. Nothing that suggested celebration. Only preparation. I stepped outside. The street was still quiet. Unchanged. I stood on the pavement, my coat still on, my bag still on my shoulder, the album heavy in my mind. I took out my phone. There were missed calls, messages, from Matthew, from friends, from numbers I did not recognize. I did not listen to them. I did not read them. I turned my phone off. And for the first time that day, I made a decision. I did not go to the church. I did not explain. I did not announce anything. I simply did not arrive. The wedding did not take place. But at that moment, Matthew did not know that. All he knew was that I had gone quiet. No answers. No explanations. No confrontation. Everything stopped. In silence. I got into my car and drove away from Guildford, back toward my flat. The streets filled gradually. The day moved on. People went about their lives, unaware that mine had split into a before and an after. I parked, went inside, locked the door, and sat down on the edge of my bed. My wedding dress was still hanging in the wardrobe, untouched. I did not cry, not yet. The pain was too contained, too precise, like a wound you know will hurt, but has not started bleeding. If you are still listening, comment the number 4 below. Not because you want drama, but because you understand what it feels like to realize, in one quiet moment, that the life you were about to walk into was never truly yours. He arrived just after 7. The sky outside my window had already darkened, that soft blue-grey that settles over England in the early evening. This was the hour I should have been standing in a white dress, listening to music echo through a church. Instead, I was barefoot in my flat, the lights low, the air still. The doorbell rang once. Not rushed, not impatient. I did not move immediately. When I opened the door, Matthew stood there as if nothing had happened. He was holding a paper bag of food in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Takeaway from the Italian place we both liked. A familiar label. A familiar smile. There you are, he said lightly. I thought traffic might slow me down. He leaned forward as if to kiss my cheek, then stopped when he noticed my expression. For a moment, his smile flickered. Then it returned. Calm, controlled. Can I come in? He asked, already stepping past me. I closed the door behind him. He placed the food on the kitchen counter, set the wine down carefully, like a man settling into an ordinary evening. Long day, he said. You must be exhausted. There was no anger in his voice, no confusion, no question. He did not ask where I had been. He did not ask why I had not come. He behaved as if the wedding had simply been postponed, misplaced somewhere in the day, not cancelled by my absence. I watched him move around my kitchen, opening drawers, finding glasses, as if this was still his space. Did you eat? He asked. No, I said. I brought plenty, he replied. You need to keep your strength up. That word again. Need. He poured wine, his hand steady, then turned to me. You shouldn't have left so early this morning, he said. Mum said you seemed unsettled. So she had told him. I needed space, I replied. He nodded, as if that made sense. Of course, he said. It's a big day. A big day. Past tense, but only just. I leaned against the counter, crossed my arms. Why didn't you tell me you'd been married before? I asked. The question landed quietly. Matthew did not react immediately. He took a sip of wine, swallowed, then smiled. It never came up, he said. It wasn't relevant. Not relevant. I watched his face closely. There was no guilt, no shock, only calculation. And the woman I saw at your mum's house this morning, I continued. Who was she? His smile tightened. A friend, he said. She was dropping something off. I waited. He filled the silence himself. You're reading too much into things, he added. You always do when you're stressed. There it was. The gentle correction. The reframing. I stepped closer. You brought food, I said. You brought wine. You came here smiling. I paused. Why? I asked. Why are you acting like nothing happened? Matthew exhaled softly, as if I were the unreasonable one. Because panicking won't help, he said. We can still fix this. Fix. The word landed differently now. He moved closer, lowered his voice. You embarrassed my mum today, he said quietly. She had people waiting. She had arrangements. Not guests. Not family. Arrangements. I didn't ask for this, I said. For any of it. He laughed. Not cruelly. Just briefly, under his breath. Nobody ever asks for responsibility, he said. They grow into it. I looked at him. Really looked. This was the man I was supposed to marry. The man who did not ask if I was hurt. The man who did not ask why I was shaking. Only whether things were still manageable. Do you love me? I asked. The question surprised him. For a fraction of a second, he hesitated. Then he smiled again. That's not the point, he said. Love isn't what keeps things together. There it was. Clear. Undeniable. I chose you because you're steady, he continued. Because you don't make scenes. Because you understand how things work. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. You chose me because I fit, I said. He did not deny it. You're safe, he replied. You make sense. Safe. The same word. Now stripped bare. I stepped back. This wedding is over, I said. Matthew's smile faltered. Just slightly. You're tired, he said. We'll talk in the morning. No, I replied. There is no morning for us. The room felt very quiet. He looked around my flat, as if noticing for the first time that none of this was guaranteed. You're making a mistake, he said. People like us don't start again easily. People like us. I opened the door. I am not yours to manage, I said. And I never was. He stood still for a moment. Then he picked up the wine bottle, the food, the things he had brought to feed a future that no longer existed. At the door, he turned back once. This didn't have to be difficult, he said. I met his eyes. It did, I replied. Because you never planned to tell me the truth. He left without another word. I locked the door, leaned against it, and let the silence return. If you are still here, comment the number 5. Not because you enjoy confrontation, but because you recognize the moment when someone finally reveals who they really are. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the sofa with a blanket around my shoulders, the city outside my window moving on without me. Sometime after midnight, I picked up my phone and called the only person I knew would not ask me to calm down. Clara answered on the second ring. You didn't get married, she said. Not a question, a statement. No, I replied. There was a pause. Then she said, do you want me to come over? Yes, I said. Please. She arrived within 30 minutes, still wearing her coat, hair pulled back in a hurry. She looked around my flat, then at me. You're not crying, she said. Not yet, I replied. We sat at the table, 2 mugs of tea between us. I told her everything. The house, the folder, the album, the smile that never broke. Clara listened without interrupting. She always did. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and said, okay, just that. Then, let's find out who she is. I blinked. Who? The woman in the photographs, she said. The one he didn't tell you about. I hesitated. Matthew said it was years ago. Clara raised an eyebrow. And you believed him, she said gently. I did not answer. She took my phone, placed it on the table between us. Do you remember her name? She asked. No, but you remember her face, Clara said. That's enough. She opened her laptop, logged into her social media accounts. Clara had always been good at this. Not obsessive, not invasive, just thorough. We started with Matthew. Public profile. Limited information. Photos carefully chosen. Nothing personal. Nothing revealing. He curates, Clara said. That's intentional. She moved on to his tagged photos, then to old comments, then to accounts that no longer existed. It took time, an hour, then another. At some point, Clara stopped typing. Here, she said. She turned the screen toward me. A profile. Private. Minimal. But the profile picture stopped my breath. The woman from the album. Blonder. The same eyes. The same familiar tilt of the head. Her name was Hannah. We clicked through what we could see. Few posts. Old dates. A life that had been trimmed back. But then, Clara found it. A comment from Matthew. Years ago, under a photo of a garden. A heart. A date. Before he had ever met me. That's not nothing, Clara said quietly. We sat in silence. Then Clara spoke again. I'm going to message her, she said. My chest tightened. Should we? I'm not accusing, Clara replied. I'm asking. She typed carefully. Hello, Hannah. I know this may be strange. I was recently engaged to Matthew Caldwell. I believe you were married to him previously. I am not looking for trouble. I am looking for clarity. She showed me the message, then sent it. We waited. Minutes passed. Then half an hour. I watched the screen, then looked away, then back again. Just as I was about to suggest we stop, a notification appeared. Hannah had replied. Her message was short. I wondered when someone would reach out. My stomach dropped. Clara typed back, asking if she would be willing to talk. Another pause. Then Hannah replied again. Yes, but not by message. Can we speak? We arranged a call for the next evening. When Clara closed the laptop, the room felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. For the first time since the morning, I did not feel alone in what I knew. I didn't imagine it, I said. Clara looked at me. No, she said. You noticed it. We did not speculate. We did not jump to conclusions. We agreed on one thing only. Whatever the truth was, it had been hidden deliberately, and that meant it mattered. Before Clara left, she squeezed my hand. We'll listen, she said. Then we decide. After she was gone, I stood at the window and watched the street below. People laughed. Taxis passed. Someone argued into a phone. Life, continuing. I thought of Matthew, somewhere out there, still believing this could be managed. Still believing silence meant compliance. I did not block him. I did not respond. I waited, because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is give someone the space to believe they are still in control. If you are still following this story, comment the number 6. Not because you want answers immediately, but because you understand that the truth often arrives through patience, not confrontation. We spoke the next evening. Hannah called exactly on time. Her voice was calm, flat, as if she had already told this story enough times to know where it would hurt. I don't talk about this often, she said. So, if I pause, give me a moment. I told her that was fine. Clara sat beside me, silent, listening. Hannah began without introduction. I married Matthew when I was 27, she said. He was steady, reliable, quiet. The same words, the same order. I owned a house then, she continued. Nothing grand. A small terrace, but it was mine. She paused. That mattered to him. She explained how he never asked directly, never pushed, never demanded. Instead, he suggested, refinancing, tax efficiency, putting things in joint names. It sounded sensible, Hannah said, and his mother agreed. Vivienne. She said it would protect us, Hannah went on. Protect Matthew. Protect. Hannah laughed softly. There was no humor in it. I trusted them, she said. I thought that was what marriage was. The paperwork came slowly, one signature at a time, one reassurance at a time. I didn't realize what was happening until it was already done, she said. The house was sold. Quietly, efficiently. Matthew handled the logistics. Vivienne attended meetings. I was told it was temporary, Hannah said. That we'd buy again, somewhere better. They never did. Within a year, Matthew was distant. Within 18 months, he was gone. He said it wasn't working, Hannah said. He said I had changed. He left with savings, she continued. I left with nothing. She did not cry. She described moving between rentals, then friends' sofas, then a single room in a shared flat. I disappeared, she said. That's what they count on. I felt my throat tighten. Why didn't you fight? Clara asked gently. Hannah was quiet for a moment. Because I didn't know what I was fighting, she said. By the time I understood, there was nothing left to prove. She told us about the silence afterward. No apologies, no explanations, just absence. And then, she said, I saw him again. My breath caught. At his mother's house, Hannah continued. Not long ago. The room seemed to tilt. He asked me to come, she said. Said he needed something finalized. Something. I didn't realize I was walking back into the same room, she said. The same table. The same folder. He smiled, Hannah said. Just like he always did. She stopped. That morning, she said, I realized I wasn't the last. There was nothing dramatic in her voice. No anger. Just resignation. I left quickly, she said. I knew what was happening. I understood then. The blonde woman. The urgency. The fear. Why didn't you warn me? I asked. Hannah did not hesitate. Because you wouldn't have believed me, she said. And because I didn't know how to say it without sounding mad. Mad. Bitter. Unstable. All the words that silence women after things are taken from them. When Clara messaged me, Hannah said, I knew it was time. We sat in silence. The truth had weight, not because it was loud, but because it explained everything. The folder, the questions, the careful smiles. You didn't imagine any of it, Hannah said. They look for women who won't shout, who won't cause scenes, who will be polite, like me. I'm sorry, she added. I wish I could say it ends cleanly. The call ended soon after. No promises, no plans, just the truth, finally spoken. Afterward, Clara and I did not speak for a long time. I walked to the window, looked out at the city. Somewhere, Matthew was still moving through his day, believing this was salvageable, believing I would return to the table. I did not feel anger. I felt cold, not the sharp kind, the numb kind, the kind that arrives when you realize the system was never broken. It was working exactly as intended. If you are still here, comment the number 7. Not because this shocked you, but because you recognize what it feels like to understand the truth after it is already too late. Once Hannah told her story, things began to make sense. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a map slowly revealing itself. Clara was the one who said it out loud. This isn't just about you, she said. And it wasn't just about Hannah. I knew she was right. The patterns were too consistent, too deliberate. Over the next few days, we began to look properly, not obsessively, not emotionally, carefully. Matthew had lived under different versions of himself, not fake names, but adjusted ones, middle names used instead of first names, addresses that changed just enough to avoid overlap, online profiles scrubbed every few years. Nothing illegal on the surface, nothing obvious, just enough distance to keep stories from touching. We found traces of previous relationships, not affairs, not scandals, engagements that ended quietly, women who moved cities, women who stopped posting online. When Clara cross-checked timelines, the gaps lined up, always the same pattern. A woman with property, a woman without close family support, a woman who prided herself on being reasonable. He never targeted chaos. He targeted stability. That's the trick, Clara said. If you choose women who don't scream, you can make everything disappear quietly. We contacted one of them, not with accusations, just questions. She did not want to speak, at first. Then she said one sentence that stayed with me. He made it sound like my idea. Another woman said something similar. He never forced me. He just explained why it made sense. That word again. Sense. Matthew never lied directly. He reframed. He positioned himself as the sensible option, the safe option, the man who would handle things. And his mother, Vivienne, was always nearby. Not involved on paper, not signing documents, but present. At meetings, at conversations. At the moment reassurance was needed. He's had a hard life, she would say. He needs support. Support meant access. Support meant trust. Once trust was given, the machinery moved. Refinancing, joint assets, shared liability, then distance, then silence, then disappearance. We spoke to a private investigator, not because I wanted revenge, not yet, because I wanted to understand what I had nearly stepped into. He confirmed what we suspected. This is organized, he said. Not rushed, not greedy. A slow extraction, he called it. One relationship at a time. Never overlapping publicly. Never creating conflict. If someone resisted, he withdrew. He waited. And when the woman realized what she had lost, there was nothing left to connect him to it. No shouting, no violence, no scandal, just paperwork. And smiles. I listened, my hands folded in my lap. It was strange to hear my own story, repeated back to me, as a case study. This kind of man, the investigator said, relies on politeness, on women who don't want to be dramatic, on women who doubt themselves, women like me. I asked one final question. Why now, I said. Why did it almost work again? The investigator leaned back. Because you didn't break the pattern, he said. Until you did. Matthew had expected silence, confusion, compliance. What he did not expect was connection. Women talking, comparing notes, refusing to disappear. Clara closed her notebook. So what now? She asked me. I thought about that, about the house I still owned, the life I had interrupted in time, about Hannah, and the others who had not. I don't want him arrested, I said. Not yet. I wanted something else. Understanding had given me distance. Distance had given me control. This was no longer just about heartbreak. It was about preventing the next woman from sitting at that table, looking at that folder, and thinking she was imagining things. I was done being polite, but I was not going to scream. I was going to document, because systems like this do not collapse under emotion. They collapse under light. If you are still listening, comment the number 8. Not because this feels clever, but because you understand that some truths only make sense once you stop blaming yourself. It started with the camera. I noticed it 3 days after Matthew left my flat. A small black dome, fixed above the entrance to my building. It had not been there before. I was sure of that. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A security upgrade. A neighbor's request. But then, I saw the angle. It was pointed directly at my door. Not the hallway. Not the stairs. My door. I did not panic. Not outwardly. I walked past it as I always did. Unlocked my door. Closed it carefully. Inside, I leaned against the wall and listened to my own breathing. That evening, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I did not answer. A message appeared instead. Just checking you're safe. You seemed tense the other night. Matthew. I did not reply. 5 minutes later, another message. You left without finishing the conversation. That's not like you. I turned the phone face down. The next day, Clara came with a small box. Cameras of our own. Not dramatic. Not visible. Placed carefully. Quietly. Front door. Back window. Hallway. I hated that it had come to this, but I hated the alternative more. That night, the calls began. Always from different numbers. Always polite. You don't need to do this. We can talk. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted. I just want to understand what you think you're doing. Think. As if this were a misunderstanding. As if I had misread my own life. On the fourth night, he came in person. I was not expecting him, but I was ready. He stood across the street, under a street lamp, hands in his pockets, watching. I did not open the door. My phone rang. Open up, he said calmly. We shouldn't involve other people, meaning the police, meaning witnesses. You're scaring yourself, he continued. This isn't healthy. Gaslighting, now without decoration. I stayed silent. Minutes passed. Then, his voice changed. Not louder, sharper. You're making this difficult, he said. You're forcing my hand. There it was. The threat, finally visible. I did not move. Eventually, he left. But the pressure did not. Packages arrived I had not ordered. Letters with no return address. Messages that referenced places I had been. I felt watched, measured. Clara insisted I keep a log. Dates, times, words, everything. Matthew was losing control. I could feel it. His messages became erratic, less polished. You think you're smarter than me. You think you've won. I never responded. Silence was the only thing. That unsettled him. One evening, the camera notification flashed. Movement detected. I opened the feed. Matthew was at my door. Not knocking, not ringing. Just standing there, close enough that the lens caught his face. His smile was gone. He leaned toward the camera. I know you're inside, he said softly. My body went cold. I did not scream. I did not hide. I called the police. When they arrived, he was gone. But this time, there was a record, a pattern, evidence. The officer looked at the footage, then at me. You did the right thing, he said. I did not feel brave. I felt exhausted. That night, I slept with the lights on, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I refused to disappear quietly. Matthew had always relied on that. Silence, politeness, doubt. This time, he had pushed too far. And in doing so, he had broken the one rule that had kept him safe. Control. If you are still here, comment the number 9. Not because this feels dramatic, but because you understand what it means when survival becomes the only priority. They arrested him on a Tuesday morning, not dramatically, not in front of a crowd. 2 officers arrived at his office, with calm voices and careful words. Matthew did not resist. He smiled, even then, as if this were a misunderstanding that could still be corrected. When I heard the news, I did not feel relief. I felt distance, like something that had been too close for too long had finally stepped back. The court process moved slowly. Paperwork, statements, timelines. Hannah testified. So did 2 other women. Not all of them wanted their names read aloud. They did not cry. They did not raise their voices. They described houses, documents, moments when things stopped making sense. The judge listened, carefully, without interruption. Matthew sat very still. When it was his turn to speak, he said very little. He spoke about intentions, about misunderstandings, about relationships being complicated. No apologies. Vivienne did not attend every hearing. When she did, she sat behind him, hands folded, eyes forward. She never looked at me. The verdict did not feel like a victory. It felt like an ending that arrived quietly. Charges upheld, restrictions imposed. Enough to stop him. Enough to protect the next woman. After it was over, I walked out of the building alone. The air felt different, lighter, uninterested in my past. That night, I dreamed of my father again. We were in the same room as before. The same chair, the same lamp. He looked at me and smiled this time. You listened, he said. I sat on the floor in front of him, the way I had when I was a child. I didn't know if it was real, I said. It doesn't have to be loud to be real, he replied. Your body knew. I woke up with tears on my face, but my chest felt calm. In the weeks that followed, life did not transform overnight. There were quiet mornings, ordinary errands, long walks, but something fundamental had shifted. I no longer explained my instincts away. I no longer apologized for discomfort. I trusted the pause, the hesitation, the feeling that said, "This is not safe." That is what this story is about. Not revenge, not cleverness. Survival. Intuition is not fear. It is information. And when we learn to listen to it, we do not just escape danger, we return to ourselves. If you stayed until the end, thank you. And if you have ever ignored a feeling because it seemed inconvenient, remember this. Sometimes, that feeling is the part of you that wants you to live. Comment the number 10 if this story stayed with you.